Hello, everybody. Good day to you, wherever you happen to be. This is another episode of Today New Brunswick, Tomorrow the World. And I'm fully to blame that the previous episode has not yet been released in terms of production. But the thing that I'm trying to do here now is I'm trying to break a record of sorts because the other podcast has 2 episodes in the can that need to be produced. So now I'm going to have this is going to be the first time I've had 2 backlogged episodes of the 2 podcasts each. So that is a record, and I'm milking the fact that I'm moving across the country as far as an excuse.
Exactly. It's almost tomorrow in New Brunswick for you now.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't think we need to rebrand.
Yeah, we can keep the name.
Yeah. Today, the world, tomorrow, New Brunswick. Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I could do a very kind of argy-blargy kind of view of. I made a very important insight into. In terms of packing today, I realized I'm taking all my vinyl in some way through checked baggage.
Yeah.
So I've got about 10 boxes of it, or so. The 70 pound. So what? I own 700 pounds of records, give or take.
Wow.
However many records. Is.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna be like, yeah, each bag I'm gonna pay $125 to Air Canada, whatever.
Yeah.
Because it's cheaper than the $5,000 that it would cost to like ship it by a professional moving company.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, and yeah. I got the weight measure, like lifting it and just checking just to make sure I'm within my limits. And I realized I've got like 5.5 years of just notebooks of like writing, personal, random kind of notes and stuff, just blargy things. Yeah. And now they're just sitting on my floor, and I'm like, I'm taking these bastards to the dumpster because the recycling, just because it's not made of vinyl, and therefore, like what? I'm not Cormac McCarthy. No one's going to want this at Yale. So I guess that's progress of a sort. Anything I can do to, remove ballast, as we totally don't say in the Maritimes. Anyway, man, I'm just rambling. I'm in no way prepared for this episode, but I'm willing.
That's okay. It's a loose.
Go along with the topic. You did have a good topic for it. So why don't you?
I'll explain what it is here. And I figured I thought the title would be extra credit or mixed media. There's just other media about music. And I realized mine are all ended up kind of being, a little similar, even though they're made, they may be made by folks, at different times, that sort of thing. But anyways, yeah. So like books, movies, I picked 2 movies, 2 books, and a podcast that all kind of, tie into like music and bands, and sometimes like starting your first band. Did
you ever take like English lit at university or like media studies or anything like that?
A little bit, a long time ago.
I just feel like you would have enjoyed the crap out of it just based on how you kind of framed what we're speaking to. Well, I'm thoroughly interested in your topic, and I've got maybe 3 or 4 books I can probably name the titles of with some degree of accuracy. So I'm not going to let that keep me from trying to talk about it, given the circumstances. It was like I was going to do this from the hotel room, but then the Amazon person was like, I'm here and I got 6 large size Air Canada bags. You might want them off your doorstep. I do want them off my doorstep. I was planning on doing what I just did for 2 hours. I was planning on doing for 2 hours after the podcast. I was prepared to be prepared, and then like, yeah, I don't suppose you want 7, Amazon large boxes just sitting there for hours. So in this kind of world we're living in, Dan. So why don't you batter up with number 1 of which?
All right. Number 1, I'll talk about the first. I guess I'll talk about one of the books first. And that's one that I think I've referenced it on the show in the past, but it's called "I'm Not Holding Your Coat" by Nancy Burrell. And what it is it's a memoir about booking shows in Philadelphia in the early 80s.
I remember you mentioned it at least twice before.
Exactly. And anyways, Nancy Burrell, it almost reminds me of, I don't know if you read that book, Just Kids. That was Patti Smith's book about like her early time in New York living with Robert Mapplethorpe.
No.
Okay, that's also a really good read.
I'm sure it is.
When I first read this, I thought of it as like, the like suburban hardcore kid version, where like, Just Kids is like, moving to the Lower East Side in the 70s, wherever, and just that whole, end of the scene. Yeah, exactly. Like the whole like basketball diaries kind of, end of the world. And this one's more like 1982. And Jello Biafra wrote me a letter saying that the dead Kennedys need to play. You need someone to rent a community hall for them to play in. So that's what me and my friends did. Like that kind of, like when that whole original, that original sort of like clandestine touring network outside of like the bar scene that really sort of started to come together in like the early 80s. Like it's pretty much firsthand stories about like the Philadelphia stop on that particular network. And it was originally written to be as the first part of a book about how, punk rock made her a better educator, where it was sort of the historical context end of things that, the publisher was so interested in. It's like, look, you can do the other part as like, a second book later on. We want this, this punk rock book now. And it's a pretty cool read. And it's got sort of, there's like a romance angle in it too. It's got the history of the story of how she met her husband, who she's still with, Al Baril, who played guitar in the Boston band SSD Control, who she initially met booking shows for them in Philadelphia. And it's just a really cool read about like, a specific moment in time in a city that's not necessarily considered like one of like the number 1 cities. Like it's more so like kind of just referred to as a joke, like the place where they throw batteries at sports teams. And Gritty is considered the local patron saint, that kind of town.
They have the most brutal sports fans.
Yes, they do.
Across multiple leagues.
Yep.
Nick Nurse from the Raptors is now head coach of the 76ers.
Oh, wow.
So that'll be, I watch enough basketball to find that somewhat interesting storyline. But no, man, when I think of Philadelphia lately, it's in terms of Soul Glow. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would have said beach slang. But then he kind of came out as, bad juju around. These people, so whatever. I've been waiting to say this on the show. I do have 2 of their records, 2 beach records from when I considered them still a band before one dude kicking out the other ones. Going on to be problematic. So I can sort of listen to the first LP and then the comp of the previous 7 inches and go, I'll take it as within a coherent group of people and not just this one friggin' nerd, right? I can still I can enjoy pre-Chinese democracy Guns N' Roses. These are important things to note for the record, man.
Exactly.
Okay,
but Philadelphia, pardon?
You're giving that book a big 2 thumbs up.
I am giving that book a big 2 thumbs up. It's definitely worth a read. Nancy Brill has since put together like a coffee table book about her husband's old band SSD, called "How Much Art Can You Take?" That just came out recently. That like she did a bunch of interviews with the band and sort of other related folks with stories about like they were all there for like the night that Fear played SNL, and things like that.
Legendary cocaine.
Yeah.
Fueled John Belushi hanging off the thing.
Yeah. But I'm giving that book. I'm giving I'm Not Holding Your Coat definitely a thumbs up as one of my favorite books about like music and the music scene that I've read recently. Yeah.
Well, that's cool, man. Well, I mean, the one I'm gonna come into will come as no surprise to anybody, and that's But in terms of like the person who wrote it, what he's managed to accomplish on a few different levels. So the book I'm talking about is Trouble Boys: The True Story of the Replacements.
Oh, nice.
And that's by Bob Mayer, who's a journalist from Memphis, thereabouts, southern U.S., covering the music scene down there. And basically, career kind of music columnist, if you will, pitched, a sort of tell-all, like all people involved kind of narrative to the band, its management, the people around it, and they just were impressed enough to go with his proposal. And it's, considered not just in terms of like the story of this pretty unique band. There's the whole mythery of the self-destructive antics and this and that, all of which is out there to be found on the internet elsewhere. But you look at some of the songs, I think just for a certain kind of person they resonate. It lands with me, which I just it's just been the case since I latched onto it at an early age. And the Bob, there's a few significant Bobs in the group orbit. The second guitarist, the replacement for Bob Stinson, was actually Bob Dunlap, but Paul was just like, we're calling you Slim. We can't have people calling you Bob. So
your new Bob.
So and it's just the story. I mean, the narrative that's in there about the band is just brutal, and it's like, wow, you friggin' people are just, you really were not hanging on by very much there back in terms of your personal lives or your health or anything else. But you live to tell the tale, largely. Bob Stinson passed away in the early 90s of basically hard lifestyle over the years. But, the story did well enough that Bob Mayer, has now been curating some enhanced disc release, some reissues of the discography, writing liner notes. The liner notes, he won a Grammy Award for Best Liner Notes for the essay that he wrote to do with their Don't Tell a Soul reissue, Dead Man's Pop. Just completely re-engineered the project, kind of thing. And he also wrote a very significant essay for this 11-record Wilco Yankee Hotel Foxtrot monstrosity reissue. That back when I was like just burning credit card money, I'm like, yeah. So now it's in an Air Canada satchel on the side there. So he's gone on to do some just really worthwhile, cool projects as a writer. And there's been talk about like people maybe buying the movie rights to it or something like this. I don't think it'll ever happen. I don't think it'll be popular enough or people will be enough interested. But if they do, I'm following along, and because that's just it's like Kiss Army. It's like friggin' just Grateful Dead for those who are in terms of that. So anyway, man, that's the one that I was just prepared to speak to, rambling with, than I did. So Thanks. I'm giving that one thumb up here and
All right.
one thumb up here for that.
Excellent.
So, thanks,
Yeah.
man.
All right. I'll talk about the other book that I picked next, which is kind of it's my first pick was about somebody who was talking about their time, being young and hopeful in the scene and how like influenced them to be a better person. And this one is my other pick is almost the polar opposite of that, which is Mutations by Sam McPheeters. I don't know if you're familiar with Sam McPheeters at all.
You haven't mentioned this person before on this show, have you?
I'm not sure if I have, but
I don't think you have.
He was a singer for a band that was originally started out in New York, but eventually moved to Richmond, Virginia, called Born Against in the late 80s and early 90s.
I'm familiar with them, yeah.
Yeah, and like he was in a few other bands after that, like Men's Recovery Project, who were more of like a noise experimental thing. And Wrangler Brutes, and like a few other different projects over the years, and then mainly transitioned to writing. He's written a couple novels, and he was on the writing staff at Vice for many years, and that was sort of the era that his time at Vice was sort of the era that produced a lot of the essays that ended up being printed in Mutations, which is kind of his meditations on like a life in the hardcore scene and the adverse effects it's had on him, like mentally, physically, and just, it's like a warts and all kind of there's some reminiscence to it, as well as like essays about a lot of bands that were influential to him over the years, and like, artists he's met sort of through time touring and that sort of thing. There's like a really cool little profile on Doc Corbin Dart, the guy that sang for the Crucifix, who he has a whole his whole life story. It's definitely worth reading. Checking out the book's worth checking out just for his his whole story arc alone. Like it's like the guy had a very interesting life, and yeah, as well it's intermixed. Yeah, it's mixed in with stories about time, Sam McPheeters' time, mostly in Born Against, where they were pretty like vocally outspoken, shit disturbing kind of band. And a lot of this book, the big chunks of this book are him kind of like just, going over everything, the kind of things he said, and how some of it was maybe more the product of him acting out on like unresolved mental health stuff, wanting to start fights rather than just saying, really believing in the position he was, the positions he was standing behind at the time. And it's kind of, the last section of it is like his big confession of how he basically financed the band with like a trust fund that he never told anyone about while they were playing at these like grimy squats in New York in like 1988. And, he was always kind of like sneaking the money into the gas tank when they needed and that sort of thing, all from this like his parents like ill-gotten like weapons manufacturer investments or some shit like that. And he's like a really great writer. It definitely like stinks of, dude who worked at Vice in the aughts at times. But, he also wrote for MRR for a long time as well. And, like I said, he's a pretty good writer. He has some good insights. It is very much just like, man, I was a dumbass when I was a kid, in so many words. But it's definitely worth a read. It's also got like very extensive footnotes as well. Like, and it's pretty cool. Like I picked it up on a whim, like probably late last year, and it's definitely worth a read. Like Born Against were a band that I quite enjoyed, and like I can, I still enjoy their music, even if it's just like, oh no, that dude just really wanted to like make people mad at him, and things like that, but yeah, the book's called Mutations by Sam McPheeters, and yeah, it's worth checking out. 2 thumbs up. I don't know if you had
that has anything to do with the Crucifix has piqued my interest, man. On general principle, good stuff. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to.
Oh yeah, no, man. I got a few salted away.
Okay, cool.
So for my second, I might even be able to think third. God, I almost if I can't think of my third, my third is that I want to spend 5 minutes talking more about Vice and the Schadenfreude that I feel with Vice. Schadenfreude, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. A lot of really good writing came out of that, and a lot of really just bad, shitty bro culture.
Yeah.
I'm just like, don't let the door slam your ass on the way out, kind of a bit. But like a lot of creative people, they got good money from some of that stuff. So
exactly, they're so even some of like I'll admit I watch a couple of the Vice TV things.
Yeah, no, man.
They produce they're the ones that produce Dark Side of the Ring, which is a show made by partially one of the two people behind is from Halifax, actually. That's a pro wrestling true crime documentary show that they have. But
I think some
Vice,
of their content is probably awesome.
It is,
if I wanted to go down a tunnel looking for the awesome stuff, I probably, dig very deeply for a while. So
yeah, there is, but it definitely has its a lot of other things.
I was, that Nazi.
Yeah, I remember that. It's like that guy went from, and that guy, there was like definitely a period of time when that guy was like socially acceptable. Like in the aughts, there was like that certain edgelordy time where if you were just, it's like if you had good cocaine and some slurs, you could get by. And
wasn't like settings. American Apparel, like
it was the American Apparel that was
association with those people, like with
that guy was awful too.
Just douchery.
It's just
douchery is what I.
Yeah, it's just.
That's what I think of. Like Little Rebel, magazine from Montreal.
Yeah, and then just all so horrible.
And now, on Instagram, I see Vice Golf, and I'm like, is that like what ended up trickling out of the is still the remainder of branded property?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they're still doing cocaine while they're golfing, to keep it Vice. But
Well, okay, so there.
Allegedly,
that was my number two anyway. I will. My real number two is Corporate Rock Sucks: The Rise and Fall of SST Records.
Oh, nice.
By Jim Ruland, LA writer. He actually, had a career, interesting things. He was like in the Marines for a while. Was in like sales and marketing or something afterwards for a while. But he was like, he's I think he's from, the South, the LA area. I don't even know where particularly. Mm-hmm. But, he did scenes, he was like, somebody who wrote, on the early, LA, zine, like what, Flip Side, I want to say.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I think that's what it is from LA, from that era, early 80s.
That was one of those like long-standing ones too.
Yeah, it was, with kind of higher production values and like people actually paying money to advertise in it, that kind of deal a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So higher end fanzine, and I think he was in on it from pretty much the beginning. And I think it probably folded not that long ago. I don't know that it's still going, but all of that to say, he wrote a book about the history of Greg Ginn's SST Records. And, he talks about Greg Ginn as an artist, as a, somebody who was just really vigilant and malicious about his business practices, as well as being like this really, incredibly talented guitar player in one of the most explosive bands of the era, in any genre of guitar music, in my opinion. I mean, like that whole, like, they got a lot of stuff that's kind of filler, I'll admit, but, even outside just like the standing over the black flag, inner stuff, circle kind of stuff, just seeing, all the friggin' range and scope of artists who, went through there. And some of it's just so bizarre in terms of how, like what it sounds like it consisted of, like this weird lawsuit against U2, like FST was like, yeah, like just all this really crazy, weird stuff. But Rulin, he writes about it really just interestingly as any, any piece of journalism about the era, And I'll just say, apart from that book, he also co-authored Bad Religion's recent biography.
Oh yeah.
To do what you want, and he's like listed as a co-author, in addition to members of the band. So that's sort of a different venture. But then he also does novels and short stories, on small, small presses that I haven't read any of that. And he also wrote a book. Keith Morris.
Oh yeah.
My Damage. Written.
Yes, yeah.
So this guy is like really like he's the '80s LA punk hardcore whisperer. So I've got the Morris book. I haven't read it. It's wherever the crap it is now. Oh my god! I know where it is. I gave away all my books to my kid's mom and the kids. All of them, even ones that nobody there has ever read. Just like, I'd rather not take it. So, yeah. Well, if I'm ever up there for the holidays, visiting, I'll have to make sure I grab that one back.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's my thing for Jim Ruland as a writer, and then I guess specifically, the SST book that he wrote.
Nice. Yeah. All right. I will right now. I guess I will quickly talk about the two movie picks that I had.
Please.
One of which is a movie originally from 1982, directed by Lou Adler, who was originally a record producer. Like he produced like Carole King's Tapestry and stuff like that. And then he directed all of the Cheech and Chong movies. But as well, in around 1982, he made a movie that never really got released until got into wide release until the late 90s, called Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains. And what it is, it's actually it's written by Nancy Dowd, who was a screenwriter who wrote Slapshot. And technically, they take part in a shared universe. Because it starts out in the same mill town that the hockey team from Slapshot plays in, and it's about these three teenage girls from this shitty mill town who run away from home. They're trying to start a band. They end up talking their way onto a tour with a British punk band called the Looters, who were played by Ray Winstone and members of the Sex Pistols and the Clash. In the band, in the movie, it's like Steve Jones and Paul Cook from the Sex Pistols, and Paul Simonon from the Clash, and then Ray Winstone on vocals. And they actually wrote a few songs for it. The main song that gets played a bunch of the movie, "Join the Professionals," is like it's a pretty catchy song. I've seen I know they released it as an actual single, like the band The Looters. Like that these dudes play in the movie. But anyways, these girls, they start a band called The Stains and talk their way onto this tour with the Looters. And then this like cheesy old like kind of hair metal band whose guitarist drops dead the first day of the tour. And they end up leaving, opening more room on the bill for The Stains to jump in and start playing songs. And even though they're not very good, they end up kind of being confrontational on stage and speaking their mind and getting, starting to build this following. who all start trying to dress like their singer, and they call them the Skunks, because they have, they all dye their hair like hers with black with like a blonde streak in it or something. And it's just sort of like the meteoric rise and fall of this like punk rock band. And in the end, like during the course of the movie, I guess during the course of the making of the movie, like things were kind of not great on set, and like Nancy Dowd ended up taking her name off the credits, and I can't remember what it's one of those like it's not Alan Smithy, but it's one of those kind of pseudonyms as screenwriter. And it screen tested poorly and never got released, but it kind of it ended up in cable rotation throughout the 80s and got a little bit of a following until like the late 90s. Like somebody finally started trying to get a home video release together for it, and like they tracked down fans of the movie who had copies of like whatever promotional stuff they could find to put together to like make art for the release even. And there's a little documentary on YouTube about sort of the about sort of the hunt for this like unreleased movie and trying to get it out to the small fan base that were pretty excited about it. And now it's available on the Hollywood Suite channel on like Amazon Prime Video or something like that.
Nice.
Is the easiest way to watch it now. But yeah, it stars a young Diane Lane and a very young Laura Dern, who's like, I think like she plays the bass player in the Stains, and like I think it's like her first movie, and they had to reshoot some stuff for the ending of it, and like she went through a growth spurt between the time they'd filmed the original parts and the ending, so she's just sitting down playing bass the entire time because she was towering over the rest of the band at that point. But it's just kind of like a cool little movie about like a scrappy punk rock band that kind of ends up having a meteoric rise and fall that was kind of an obscure thing that wasn't really easily available until fans kind of like tracked it down and managed to get it out there. And yeah, like I said, it's available on streaming. It's pretty cool. It's worth checking out. 2 thumbs up. The other movie that I picked is from 2013. It's a Swedish movie called We Are the Best. It's probably the best movie I've seen about starting your first band. It's directed by a guy named Lucas Moodysson, and based on a graphic. It's technically a comic book movie because it's based on a graphic novel called Never Goodbye by Moodyson's wife Coco Moodysson, who started out doing like fanzines and stuff and ended up becoming like big in like the indie comic scene in Sweden. And this Never Goodbye is like her autobiography of like being really into punk rock in that time in the 80s when it wasn't cool to be into punk rock anymore. And, kind of her and her friends trying to start their first band. And it starts with Bobo and Clara, sort of the 2 main characters, who spend all the time at this youth center that has like a jam space for bands, but it's mostly like dudes playing cheesy hair metal. And they decide, fuck it, we're going to start a band, even though we don't know how to play instruments at all. And it's just sort of like showing the process of them just trying to figure out how to like write a song. And they're not that good at it, but they find out that one of the other kids at their school who's not really like, who's not considered cool or whatever, but is like a bit of a nerd in a different way, and also very good at guitar, or they find out that she's also very good at guitar and invite her to join their band as well. And they end up like actually starting to write songs. And it's just, I've never seen, I feel like most movies I've seen about like starting your first band, it's very obvious, like it's like a very produced kind of like, okay, we've got a song and it's like, here you go. Like, I don't know if you've seen that movie Sing Street.
No.
Okay, it's made by the same folks that made Once.
God. Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, that movie is very much like, here we've got a set of songs that these actors are going to play, and We Are the Best is very authentically seemed like hey, here's these instruments. You're going to play this shitty 3-chord song that's like fast and loud, and, you know, you're screaming, and, you know, you're not trying to sing. It's just you're doing what you can with the instruments, because that's like, you know, that's how so many bands start out. And it's just, I thought it was cool that I just hadn't really seen a movie about, like, you know, a band that actually seemed like people that were just trying to learn their goddamn instruments. And like, there's even a scene where like, or there's a whole subplot in the movie where they like are writing letters to another band that they really like, who also turn out to just be like these awkward ass teenagers that live in a different town. And they're all just kind of like hanging out, being like kids that are into this thing that isn't popular anymore, but means a hell of a lot to them. And yeah, it's just like a cool, heartwarming kind of coming of age movie. And the soundtrack is all like, it's all like Swedish punk and new wave bands from that era, that it's like, it's pretty killer. Like, it's worth, I don't know if they formally released like an album, but like, yeah, like whoever curated the music for it knew what they were doing. Yeah, and that is definitely worth checking out as well. So yeah, We Are the Best, directed by Lucas Moodysson.
That soundtrack sounds like a Discogs challenge to me.
Yeah.
Once I get my
Yeah.
order established in Atlantic, Canada here presently. Well, okay, so you brought in movies, and I was thinking, fine, I've got two music-based movies that, you know, spring to mind, and I'll have a couple of little blurbs, and that'll be my last thingy on it, probably.
All right.
But two of them. So first of all, there's one of them is this sort of horror suspense film called The Green Room.
Oh yeah, holy
that's
shit!
So good, right?
Holy shit! That is the other. I feel like that's the most realistic tour movie ever, even though it is a horror.
Yeah. So I was thinking that, and I was thinking sort of on the opposite of that, The Commitments from like that's based on Roddy Doyle's first novel, and Roddy Doyle is such a friggin' rad, amazing writer who just keeps. I have no idea even what he's been doing for 20 years, but I'm sure it's fantastic. So
yeah,
that was a case where like the movie came out before I was like into hard rock or alternative, and it's just like, oh, my family put this on the VCR. Because we had a VCR and we rented it at Blockbuster, and you know, like, oh, the Irish sort of just like, you know, mannerisms, like it came off as just being like it felt like to the people doing it, it was authentic, and therefore, you know, not inauthentic to enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah.
You know, so I just, you know, and I got, they had a couple of sounds, you know, the band, like the musicians actually doing some perfectly competent, friggin', you know, rhythm and blues standards, like with energy, with heart, you know. I don't know that any of them, you know, ever sort of went on to have any great solo success, but they got 2 volumes out of that soundtrack at least, and I enjoyed throwing it on the compact disc player. Before I was into replacements, before I was into Fugazi, it was just a younger, more innocent. And then, you know, the movie was great, and I'm like, yeah, eventually, like, oh, because this guy's written a bunch of books, and they're all good, and whatever. So, as an entity, Roddy Doyle, Commitments, and yeah, the other one, friggin' Green Room. Not to go too deep into that, because there's just, you could do an entire, you know, thing, just film. But Jean-Luc Picard, you know, Patrick Stewart,
he's so menacing,
diabolical, mean, skull-headed, fucking enabling, sadistic prick, you know, just inflicting just wretched violence upon this hapless, stupid, idiotic hardcore band that just stumbled into this friggin', Nazi militia compound in Oregon because they were so inept that they had no other way of getting gas to go to or whatever. So it's and the violence of it, and the adventure story parts of it. I mean, I just got a kick out of it. I've watched it twice for sure, and I wouldn't. I'd watch it again, sure.
Yeah.
It's just he bring the Picard, not Picard, John just Stewart. It's like he brings something out in these other largely unknown actors around him, where it feels like an ensemble kind of film. Not just like this sort of one, very megastar kind of guy amongst a bunch of relatively unknown actors, which is pretty much what it is. But it's like whether he elevates them or the director just really, knows their piece, particularly for how to, get that relationship to work. I mean, anyway, I recommend it.
All right.
And those
excellent.
Are that I'm going to say. Probably.
Okay.
What else you got, Dan?
I was just going to talk about a podcast, which is no longer active, but it's all still archived. You can still find the feed and go back and find all the episodes. There's like a good couple of years of worth of episodes there. And it's a podcast called Killed by Desk. That was done by a guy named Bill Florio, who is he's a teacher who's also been a musician for years. And it's him and a couple guys that he played in a band with in the late 80s in like the New York kind of underground DIY scene. And they've all kind of moved on. Like one of them works in marketing. Like I think the other two are teachers. And what they do is they track down people that used to play in bands and who all have moved on to different careers or may also still make art, whether it's music or some other form of art.
Have you mentioned this podcast on the
I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before.
Okay.
I might have. But yeah, just to give it a little more in-depth recommendation. But yeah, they find people that have had all, like a wide variety of different, moved on to a wide variety of different careers. Who all kind of started out in kind of these like, grimy little underground touring bands, and they may still play music, they may not. But they just sort of, it's like, I don't know if you ever read that Studs Terkel book, Working.
No, can't say that I have.
Where he just does, basically, it's just kind of like long form interviews with people. I think he mostly did it in like, I think they're mostly, I can't remember, it's like late 60s, early 70s, but he just finds people that work in a variety of different jobs and just like does like long form interviews with them about their jobs and what they think about it. And like,
cool,
and it's kind of like that, but like kind of focusing on people that started out in like these like punk and hardcore bands who, like one of their early episodes had like a New York City councilor. And a library, a lot of librarians and teachers and things like that who like Kim Coletta from Jawbox was on there talking about like teaching at like a charter school in the US. And
educators in the
I can't
US
remember.
Make such garbage frigging money.
Yeah, it's yeah.
I'm just like, here, you can make 60, 70, 80 grand if you, put in the time. And I mean, by any definition of middle class, I mean, that, is a fine place to be. But down there, I mean, I just remember like in the B.Ed program, like sort of maybe looking at going down there to work in the States and like $42,000, like frig that, plus enhanced risk of getting shot on the job. No thanks. Anyway, dude, sorry,
that's okay. But yeah, like I said, they talk to people that have like, there's like, they have an episode with like a guy who's now like a fairly well-known pastry chef, who was like the drummer in Universal Order of Armageddon before that. And like, yeah, like I said, like everything from like like they talked to Milo from the Descendants about his like work in science, and 'cause I can't remember what his exact like science is. He like a biologist? And anyways, yeah, like they just talk to like it's just really cool like doing these, and like most of the conversations like an hour and a half long with these people. Yeah, and sort of it goes between like their thoughts on like art and creativity.
How many seasons did it run, did you say?
It ran for a couple of years. We'll just double.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
so there's a goodly amount of episodes.
There is a goodly amount here. I'm just gonna double check here how many.
I mean,
yeah, well, they had 79. They did 79 episodes.
Damn.
In total. So yeah, like there's a good run. Like it ran over the course of like from it ran from like 2020 to 2022, and in that time, yeah, like I said, they did almost 80 episodes, and like I said, talking to everything from like teachers to graphic artists to like they have an episode with like this guy that used to sing in an oi band who's now a boxing statistician and like punch counter. Like that, like he does, he's the guy that has to keep track of like how many of what kind of hits for scoring purposes would happen like during a particular boxing match. And just like it's cool because it's like, a mix of talking about like music and like old tour stories and stuff like that, mixed with in-depth talk about like what these folks are doing now with their lives and sort of like how they've gotten there, which I don't know, I find that kind of stuff really interesting. So it's like I said, there's a good couple of years worth of content there to go back through, even if they're not making new episodes right now. And yeah, definitely check it out.
And you're gonna have and you're gonna have links to that because
I'll definitely have links to that. Yeah. It's Bug Out Society is the name of the band that all the guys that worked on the podcast together used to play in the 80s, who were one of those just kind of like New York like street punk bands or something, and now they've had these diverse professional lives, and I just thought it was pretty cool.
I'm telling you, man, I end up buying records based off of this conversation. So once I have the proper address again to send it to. So cool, man. Is there any music out right now that you're just interested in digging, or
Military Gun just put out an album that's pretty cool. I think I've like mentioned them offhand a couple of times. They're one of the bands I'm going to go to see in Montreal in the fall.
Right, you did mention that.
Yeah, and they're pretty cool. Their singer used to be in a band called Regional Justice Center that were a little more kind of the loud and heavy and fast end of things. And like Military Gun are a little more on like they apparently they recorded at Dave Grohl's studio. And they recorded a lot of the stuff for this album at Dave Grohl's studio, and kind of pretty excited about that.
606 or whatever.
Yeah. And they were all apparently dorking out about that. So it's kind of like folks coming from the hardcore into things that can also appreciate a good melody. And yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Other than that, I mean, I'm still listening to MS Paint a lot. My girlfriend's going to see Beyonce in a couple of weeks, so that her latest album Renaissance has just been playing in the house constantly, and it's been it's been growing on me. There's a whole it's a whole thing.
If that's a part of your life,
it's around. It's cool. It's actually it's kind of interesting. It's like her tribute to like kind of like queer dance music culture, specifically like Black queer dance music culture, and like members of her family that kind of brought that influence into her life, and like has a lot of artists from those scenes like collaborating with her and stuff. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's a little more than I feel like she's moved above me on the single ladies end of things. And it's just kind of, my girlfriend's pretty excited about it. So that's been playing a lot around the house as well, so it counts as in my life.
Nifty. Well, I'll just say that I think what's probably going to be the last vinyl that I actually collect from this apartment is this band,
oh yeah, I was checking out that shirt.
Yeah,
Electron.
Yeah, Electron. I was like, Electron. So that's Matt Skiba from Alkaline Trio, Atom Willard, who's actually the new drummer for Alkaline Trio, because Derek Brandt has just announced his departure from that band. and then 2 other contemporary, a hot guitarist in some bands that I've never heard of, and a hot bass player from some bands that I've never heard of, which all have very, very nice reputation. And so Asian Man Records did up just 1,000 copies of their first 12-inch single. So just 2 songs, 2 sides, 12-inch friggin' single, on Pink and on Baby Blue. And today I got here today to find both the T-shirt and I got both colors of it. So out of the 1,000, there's 998 that belong to other people.
Nice.
So that's and that single ended up doing its final set of recording in Studio 606.
Nice.
Recording. So
cool. I remembered one other thing actually that I've been enjoying a lot lately, which is it's the debut single from a new band from St. John's, Newfoundland called So Violento. I heard about them because they played the I know folks that had gone up to play the Lanya Vanya festival, which is like their big summer indie rock festival that they have every year.
Cool.
And this band, So Violento, I think it's like one of their first shows at the festival. And they just sort of put out their first single online, but they're just this really cool, like kind of like heavy post-punk type, spooky, gothy sounding band. Like one of the members, they made a music video for the song because, of course, everybody's got like a video camera in their hands. They could do that sort of thing. And definitely looks. It wouldn't be surprised if a couple of members of the band were, had extensive nu metal sections of their record collection. But it is kind of like almost like kind of like a groovier, like Susie and the Banshees mixed with, I don't know, like something spooky with a little bite to it. But yeah, So Violento. The song's called Elegia Moderna. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. And yeah, it's worth checking out. It's yeah, they're a new band. I'm sure they'll have more out soon, and it's kind of cool that they can just sort of put it out online so people can, because I feel like they're from Newfoundland. Bands from there don't often get a chance to tour outside of Newfoundland, but they can at least release their music out online so other folks can hear it. And yeah, definitely worth checking out. So Violento, Elegia Moderna is the name of the song. Yeah. All right.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we have helped you out, all of you, with some of this great content, much of it, almost all of it improvised on my part, and with some timely music recommendations at the end. Now, I'm going to make every effort in the next few days to get these recordings out the door. It's going to happen. It's like they have to come out. I'm not a bad person. It's just they're going to come out. And it's going to be, it's just like I've got 11 cases of records. I've got a hotel room. I just got rid of my, didn't just get rid of the dog. The dog's going to be living with the kid's mom 100% of the time instead of 50% of the time. So anyway, that's all I got, Dan.
Yeah. All right. Great.
Take care, everybody.
Safe travels. All right.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.